looking back on it now, and even at the time, I remember thinking, wow, this is a terrible situation, but it doesn't feel that bad. I feel like I learned that nothing can be that bad if you have God.
Hey, this is Chris. Welcome to the Men of Iron podcast. Today we have Jen joining us. Her husband Marlin was a story that we did a while ago, and so we're so excited to have you today. So welcome, Jen. We're just going to get right into it and have you tell us a little bit about you, your faith journey, your family. So go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jen Rhoads. I'm married to Marlin Rhoads, and I have 4 kids. We have a 10-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son, and we have 6-week-old twin girls. Yes. So that's been fun. So that's pretty much us as of right now.
Yeah. So, I'd love to hear a little bit about, just about you. What's your story? This series is called Her Story. And we're just really excited to kind of sort of share what it's like to walk alongside your husband and that kind of thing. But we'd like to get to know you too. So what's your faith story? And
Okay. Well, I grew up in a conservative Mennonite setting, and so pretty much a very typical religious setting where I followed the rules. I was a rule follower, so I was a good girl for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my family life, my dad was a pastor. I feel like my family life was pretty chill. Like I don't feel like anything super hard happened. I did not grow up. I felt like I knew that my parents loved me, but I did not grow up super secure in their love. Like I've never heard my parents say that they loved me, but you just kind of knew that they did.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a fairly good childhood. I grew up on a farm. Yeah. So and then I became a Christian when I was 13. Okay. And I would say for the most part, as is typical of a lot of kids in that culture, I was scared to go to hell, and that's pretty much why I became a Christian. But I feel like I did develop my relationship with God to a certain extent through my teens. It was very surface, but it was there.
And then you met Marlin.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So we met at Bible school, a 3-week Bible school.
Okay.
And I did not know him well at all. He lived in Missouri, so he lived like 1,000 miles away.
Okay.
So I didn't really see him around. He grew up in a culture very similar to mine.
Okay.
And I would say he was a very different person. Like we're opposites pretty much, even today. Yeah. We've learned that is actually a beautiful thing. Yes. But it took us a long time to get there, and we still, are working at that.
Yeah.
But I'm very introverted, kind of. I don't have a ton of friends. I'm a homebody. Love to stay at home. Yeah. And that's just kind of how I was as a teenager too. And he's very different in that he's extroverted, he's out there, he loves people, he's a party guy. So I was attracted to him a lot because he was a talker. I don't talk much. So we would like talk on the phone when we were dating and have, hour or 2 hour long conversations with him talking most of the time. Yeah. But I love that. That's part of why I chose him, honestly.
Yeah. So then, you get married and you start this journey of marriage, and obviously, you're different. And my husband and I are very like that too. So we often come from different sides of the story, so to speak. So Marlin's story was shared, at our dinner, and so many people said how impactful it was. But, a big piece of that was you and your story. And I think that's what was so intriguing for us. And it was so powerful. So maybe just lead us into a little bit, your first years of marriage. And then we'll start to get into, this idea of like Marlin's, the story. So,
okay. So we got married. We stayed in the same church setting. Marlin was very dissatisfied with church. I was to a certain extent, but I was comfortable there. Right. So, and he was not. I was more of a rule follower. He's the type that would run from the rules.
Yes.
So that was a problem from the get-go for us. So about a year and a half in, we decided to leave our church and go to something a little more liberal. Everything was fine though, but I felt like our marriage didn't have much substance. And a lot of that came down to the fact that we never learned to know each other very well.
Right.
Part of that was our culture that we grew up in. Everything was just kind of surface. Even with my own family, we were never deep talkers, talking about deep stuff.
Don't share the
emotions.
And
I didn't know how to do that, honestly, and he didn't either. So we went into marriage barely knowing each other, I honestly feel. So a couple years in, we started seeing the real people.
Yeah.
And realizing how different we were.
Yeah.
So we left the original church that we grew up in, and then I don't know, things just kind of started going downhill from there. I think that from his perspective, I can't really speak for him totally, but I think he started feeling trapped. He does not do well in like a box. He's always wanting to bust out of the box. And I think that's, again, an awesome, beautiful thing. Like, I think that can be so beautiful.
Yeah.
But he was not mature in a lot of ways, and so it didn't always look very beautiful. Right. So we stopped going to church because he got tired of going to church, and I wanted to go to church because I thought that that's just what you do to be a Christian.
Yeah.
So I felt very scared and very fearful, and I guess it might be my personality, but I feel like a lot of women do this. I started really trying to control the situation, started nagging him. Yes. We need to go to church. So we switched to a more liberal church. That didn't solve it. We went there for a little bit. So eventually we just stopped. But he started hanging out with a group of friends on the weekends, going to bars. And that really freaked me out because I didn't know what was going on. He wouldn't talk to me anymore. Yeah. That was like probably 3 years in. So it didn't take us long to start going downhill. Yeah. So there was a lot of fear involved.
And I think as women, we try and want to fix that kind of thing. And like you said, the tighter we pull, it's often like with our children sometimes, you know, the tighter you pull, the more they, you know, try and not rebel, but, you know, push back or whatever. So, but yeah, Marlin in that story, you know, shared that he kind of sort of started doing, you know, things that maybe he knew was wrong or whatever. And so as you continue to walk alongside of him, you know, how did that feel as far as like the beginning of kind of not the end, but the spiral, if you will?
It felt very scary. We did not have kids at that point. We waited 6 years to have kids, and I'm very grateful that we did because it would not have been a healthy place for them. But yeah, there was just, again, over the years, as the years went by, it just got more and more scary for me. And I did not stop trying to control the situation. Like if I would have just given it to God right off the bat. Right. And I tried. Like there was times when I tried. But those first couple of years I was more controlling more than trusting God. Like I just and my trust in my husband went away. And I started realizing that I had my husband on a pedestal. Like he was kind of an idol. I was a little bit codependent on him. And insecure in myself, and I feel like God was like ripping my husband off the pedestal so that I would replace God. I like put God back on. And so I'm thankful now in hindsight that happened, and because I feel like if all of that had never happened, I maybe still would be that kind of a woman where I was not giving everything to God. And I feel like that has been the key in my life. So trying to think. So that was a couple years in 2011. He wanted to separate. So that was that. So I just kind of gave up on it a little bit. I let it go. I still felt like we would get back together sometime. I just never lost that. And from the culture that I was from, I thought that divorce was not an option. Right. So I was like, I'm gonna, if we never get back together, I am never going to have kids. I'm going to be a single person all my life. And that was scary. And so that was part of my my push to eventually get back together, even though it was such an unhealthy relationship.
It's almost like you're angry about it as well. You know, it's like...
And I started getting bitter.
So kind of walk us through, like you had said that he left the first time. Kind of walk us through, you know, what that was like as far as staying strong in your faith. Did you feel like at that time you really started to dig into your faith? Is that kind of when that shift happened?
Yeah. I know my sister-in-law, I met with her a couple of times, and she was just an awesome mentor for me in a way. And I felt like that helped me. I started, digging into my faith, I guess, really, and figuring out what I really believed. Did I believe that the culture I came from was where I wanted to be? Was I okay with like leaving that totally behind? Because I felt like I had to choose between my husband and my beliefs kind of, and my church. And so ultimately I did choose my husband, kind of out of fear more than anything else. And now in hindsight, again, I'm like, God had to take me out of where I was at, because I'm so thankful for what I have now and where we go to church now and all the things. But
it pulls you out of that comfort zone.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we stay there because it does feel right. And it does, it's like, well, this is a safe place for me and I don't want to be tested. I don't, I want to do all the things right and all that kind of thing. So then Marlin, if I'm remembering correctly, you separated a second time. Was that right? When he completely moved out?
Yeah. So the first time in 2011, I didn't know where to live because he essentially wanted me out of the house. He had a couple of friends that he wanted to live in our house. And it felt really, looking back now, I'm like, I'm sure everyone thought he was awful, an awful person. But he was so, I don't know. He had so many issues. I feel like in his heart was not awful. It's just sometimes we are so caught up in the mire of everything that we just can't make good decisions. And I feel like that's where he was at. So I moved to my brother and sister-in-law, the one that had been helping me out. And that was scary. There was also my brother and his wife were in Ukraine, happened to be in Ukraine over that time. So I actually moved in with a family I did not know for 3 weeks. So that was scary. But I felt so much love there. It was like taking me out of a setting where I never was told or never was shown really love physically, and thrust into an environment where I felt so loved. And so that was part of the story. I feel like that was a big turning point for me. And then in February of 2012, Marlin called and said that he became a Christian. So that was another big turning point in that first separation. So that began the journey of us getting back together that time. And then in 2014, our daughter was born in May of 2014. And in June, he said he was done with the marriage and he wanted to leave. And I found out he was in an affair. And so that time there, I felt like I really dug in to my faith. That was the time where I was getting older and I was probably getting more mature. And I had a mentor that time around that really like showed me how to listen to the Holy Spirit. And I was really starting to lean on God.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Men of Iron podcast. God has given Men of Iron a vision to change a culture one man at a time, and we cannot do that without your partnership. Our financial partners are not bystanders or accessories to the vision. They're equal partners in the work God is accomplishing. Join the movement of God by generously investing in His work. Become a monthly partner and commit to a minimum of $27 a month and equip a man with the tools needed to know God and know their purpose for 1 year. Monthly giving creates sustainability for our organization as it works to cover regular operating costs, allowing us to dream and create new opportunities for impact. As an Iron Partner, you will receive exclusive connections to God's work throughout the year with special communications, events, and touch points. Find out more at menofiron.org/donate.
So, you're in this place of not living with your husband. And I'd like to know a little bit more, like, how did you feel during that time? What did you do to kind of sort of dig deep and really focus on staying true to who you were?
Yeah, well, I had a 4-week-old child, so a first-time mom, and so that whole thing was hard to start with. And I remember like walking the house at night because she was a very fussy baby. I probably partly because life was just chaotic and I was like emotionally drained. So I just remember walking the house with her, like crying into her, and just kind of trying to get through this, but at the same time, I never felt like depressed. I always felt like God was with me. And I feel like He gave me a lot of little touches and glimpses of Him throughout the whole journey that really helped me. And I feel like that second time around, I kind of just let Marlin go. I left the marriage go. Again, I felt in my heart like it was not done. I just didn't feel like it was done and I wasn't ready to give up on it yet. But I was very, very hurt and rejected, all the things that you would feel in that situation. And so I just really started, giving it to God, letting go, detaching myself from the situation. I remember I blocked him on all social media. I would not text him unless he texted me first because I just couldn't handle seeing his life, I guess. And I also had a mentor, the same mentor, shout out to Glenda. She was awesome over that time, just showing me love and going out for coffee with me occasionally and helping me to, again, see how God was in the situation, show me how I could react or how I could respond to things. and not be so fearful and to just trust God. So I feel like I really leaned on God through that time. And it was a beautiful thing. Like looking back on it now, and even at the time, I remember thinking, wow, this is a terrible situation, but it doesn't feel that bad. I feel like I learned that nothing can be that bad if you have God.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like if I didn't have God, I don't know where I'd be at this point. I'd probably be mental, something.
Well, you were through a lot for sure.
Yeah.
I think the one thing you said that was really beautiful was this idea of, you said you let him go. And I think sometimes as Christians, as women, as, as whatever, as believers, it's like we try and hold so tightly to things. And the minute we let it go, it's like, oh my word, it's not only a weight, but it's like, why in the world did I hang on so tightly to that, But yeah, I thought that was really neat
it's
how
like
you said that.
It's like making an exhale, like, whew,
Yeah.
God, you have this.
Yeah.
I don't need to carry it anymore. And that's how I felt. And I feel like that's been the key to my life even since then. If I'm overthinking something or just really something's bothering me, if I can just let it go and just be like, okay, God, I'm just like kind of envision myself handing it over to him. This is yours. If you want me to do something about it, I will. But for now, I'm just giving it to you. So there was a lot of times in those 6 months that we were separated that time that I just left him go and just, like I said, detached myself from the situation. And I don't feel like it was, I know John Eldridge talks about a benevolent detachment where it's not a detachment out of revenge or getting back at someone. It was benevolent in that I just needed space and I needed to just be myself, learn who I was in God. That's the other thing.
And heal a little bit too.
Yeah.
So I guess it'd be a good time then to kind of shift and what was the, what was the experience or what happened that started to change things a little bit? What did that look like when Marlin, reached out and said, that he was ready to come back or
so it was about 5 months in maybe, and I don't know how much time we have here, but there's a quick story I could say that kind of helped me along the way. I don't know if you know the book, the Jesus Calling devotional, and that was a devotional I'd been using at that time. And there was a point in July or August of 2014 that I just felt like God clearly told me, look at November 12th. By November 12th, something's going to be shifting in your marriage.
Wow.
And I just felt that. So I looked ahead, I paged ahead in the book to November 12th, and it said, you have been going through, just in my own words, you have been going through a tough time. You've been trudging uphill. And I am placing you in a place of, I think it said a lush valley or something, like you're in a beautiful place. Things are gonna be better, basically. And I was like, okay. And that was the thing I clung to that summer and that fall. And as it got closer to November, I didn't think anything was changing. But again, I wasn't in contact with him a ton. He was coming to see his daughter, and he was trying to be a good dad as best he could. So I did see him like then, occasionally. But I thought he was still into the affair, like everything was like the same as it was. But then around his birthday, November 8th, he contacted me and said, hey, do you want to go out to eat for my birthday? And I was like, okay. So we went out to eat, and it was a good conversation. It was awkward. But he said that he's leaving his girlfriend, and things were going on his end, and he could say it better than me, but things were just going downhill and crazy from his end, that relationship. And so he said he's thinking about getting back together. And so over the next couple months we did, and he eventually moved back in the beginning of 2015. So looking back on it now, I feel like we could have done some more counseling, like some more mentorship to get us in a healthier place before we moved back in together. But we had come from a culture of not doing that kind of thing, so that seemed awkward to us. So we did have a little bit of counseling over that time, but not a ton. But that was helpful, at least before we moved back in together.
And then I know there's a piece in Marlin's story where you say that he brings up Men of Iron and how you were like, not really sure about this, but so what did that situation kind of entail and how did that go?
He and I, 2020 was a rough year for us. I was in therapy over that time. He eventually went into therapy as well, which was super helpful.
Yeah.
And we were close to divorce that time as well. And then he brought up Men of Iron, and he worked with a guy at work, and that was a godsend, because I don't know if he would have been willing to just hook up with just some random mentor that he didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And I was like, go for it. I didn't know if it would work.
Yeah.
I am by nature a very cautious person.
Yes,
and so I was like, well, it's a good thing. I mean, it can't be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So let's go for it.
Yeah.
So I did not expect it to make such a big change, though. Yeah. Honestly, like, I'm still surprised that it helped him so much.
Yeah. So what is it, do you feel that, like, was it more the mentorship, piece of that? And if so, like, could you speak to that at all on, the changes that you maybe saw in Marlin once he began, obviously through the counseling too, but just that mentorship piece. As his wife, what did that look like as you walked alongside that?
Yeah, I feel like it was the one-on-one mentorship. Like, if he would go out for coffee with his mentor, I would notice a change in him. And I feel like over the months, he just became a more level person. That was the one thing in our marriage. There was a lot of ups and downs. Yeah. And he was, like, sometimes really at a good place, and then he'd go down. And I feel like the one-on-one mentorship really helped him. And they didn't even necessarily follow all the lessons. He's more, like I said, he likes to live outside the box. Yeah. And he said already that if his mentor had forced him to follow all of the plan, he probably would have left it.
Yeah.
But it was basically just getting advice and getting camaraderie with another guy. And like, he had a lot of guy friends to party with, but like, to someone to actually speak life into him and like tell him, give him advice, or just help him on the journey and give him encouragement. That was
let
new.
him know that it's okay to be in this spot, but like, where are we going to go, from here? And I think too often, I know this has come up on, different talks that I've had, but like, women, it's very easy for us to do that. But guys, it's not as easy. So having that person, I feel like, to kind of sort of speak into you, just like you said, is pretty huge. So yeah, I guess, fast forward a little bit, what are some things that you're noticing that has been encouraging or exciting, as far as, even in your walk alongside him, even for you personally?
Yeah, I feel like, so this past year has been a tough year for us. It's been a beautiful year, but it's also been tough.
Yeah.
We had to move unexpectedly, and then I got sick with the pregnancy. We found out we were having twins, and that was a whole thing. And I felt like so many times that he was actually the rock in our relationship, because there was a lot of our marriage, I always felt like I was this spiritual leader, and I hated that.
Right.
And I felt like this past year, and since the Men of Iron happened, he has gotten more like he would lead us spiritually, lead our family spiritually. Yeah. And this past year, he was my rock in a lot of ways, and like the stable person in the relationship. And so I feel like I have started to like lean on him in a good way.
Yes.
And start trusting him a little bit more, because it's taking us a long time to get back to totally trusting each other. Yeah. Because he had felt a lot of judgment from me through the years. So that was the reason he wasn't sure he couldn't trust me. I couldn't trust him because of all the stuff that had happened. And so I feel like for myself, I'm starting to learn how to trust him. I've seen a lot of the fruit, a lot of good fruit come out of him. Yeah. And so, that has been great. I feel like it's also changed, and his relationship with his kids have changed. Yeah. In how he trains them. We were often not on the same page, because like I said, we were very different people. So like in training our kids, and just in a lot of different things, finances, I don't know, just a lot of life. Yeah. We were not on the same page. And I feel like we have gotten a lot more close to being on the same page about things. Right. About important things. Yeah. And our kids have really, I think, seen the stability as well, and felt that as well. So,
and I think for us too, like you were saying about how it was hard for you to like let go and give up that control. And for so many years you had to do that, because, you were raising a child, and you were doing all these things, and, praying for him and all that stuff. And I think sometimes, it's a lesson for us too, in learning to trust and actually giving that back to Marlin. That leadership position was probably a little difficult in a way, because you were so used to doing it.
Yeah. And the thing of letting go and trusting God, that's a journey. I have not always been able to do that successfully. So I feel like it's easier though, since I've seen him step up and be a leader. And most of that has happened since Men of Iron, I would say, is seeing him step up and, not having to be the spiritual leader myself has been great.
Yeah. So we kind of always like to end on just, do you have any encouraging words or anything that you could, offer to someone who may potentially be walking a similar journey, or even just, from your perspective, as a woman who has, now gone alongside a guy who's done Men of Iron or that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Again, I keep saying this, but let your guy go. And I had tried to get Marlin to do counseling or mentorship or something for years, and he never wanted to do it. And it almost hindered the process. And he decided to do Men of Iron entirely on his own. I did not push him. I did not tell him to do it. I didn't introduce him to it.
Right.
So this is really, really hard to do if you have a guy that is really struggling and doesn't want to get help or whatever it is, and you see Men of Iron program and you're like, wow, I wish he would get on board with this. Try not to push him and just pray about it. Maybe get someone else to help you pray about it. Get healthy yourself. That's the biggest thing that I saw in my own life when I started getting therapy myself and started just invest in yourself. And if you can learn how to be a healthy person apart from your husband, with God, you and God, and trust him to God, do whatever, help him, encourage him, know. I'm not saying never try and ask him to do something. Put up healthy boundaries if you need. But get healthy yourself and then give him to God. And because any other way just doesn't seem to work. It hasn't for me. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And
it was fun being here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Men of Iron podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. At Men of Iron, we exist to change a culture one man at a time, and we'd love to have you partner with us. So go to menofiron.org to see how you can get involved, or donate at menofiron.org/donate.